Learn English through Stories G25 PDF. Adapted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents 1. Dara Shikoh's Darbar, Part 1-2 Panic in a Tunnel. 3. Grammar page, When I do and when I've done. If and when. 1. Dara Shikoh's Darbar. Dara Shikoh, Shah Jahan's eldest son, was endowed with many apparent and inherent qualities. Seeing his intelligence and innovative thinking, Shah Jahan had practically handed over the management of the realm to him. Unlike other princes who were employed as rulers in the border provinces of the empire, Dara Shikoh stayed at the capital and carried out his duties with the help of his advisors. He was trained rigorously to make a worthy, experienced ruler, but it is regrettable that neither the country nor the community benefited much from it. Historians believe that if Dara Shikoh had become the emperor in place of Aurangzeb, he would have contributed much more to the glory of the empire. This opinion is debatable because usually people speak highly of those who are already dead. But it is not too difficult to see that this carries some element of truth too. Prince Dara Shikoh was a follower of Akbar. He was called Akbar II for good reason, because there were many common elements in their respective outlooks. They also adopted similar strategies to manifest their ideas into reality. With his foresighted vision, he could understand that the Mughal rule in India could not be consolidated unless there was an increased mutual and harmonious give-and-take between the Hindus and the Muslims. He knew very well that brute force alone cannot make a lasting impact. To unify an empire, it was necessary that the rulers must win the hearts and minds of the people through universally acknowledged principles and people-friendly laws. This was more important than building stone castles. He believed that rulers should place more faith in strengthening the love of the people than merely fortifying the army. Dara Shikoh had begun to work on these principles. He had written a remarkable book where he propounded the thesis that the consolidation of Muslims depended on the goodwill and friendship of the Hindus. In his eyes, personalities like Baba Kabirdas and Guru Nanak had great importance, because while other prophets accentuated differences and divisions among different groups of people, these gurus spread the message of peace and friendship. In those days, the communities of Hindus and Muslims were like two infants. Dara Shikoh thought that both these infants should be brought up with great care and affection. For the unity of the nation, Dara Shikoh followed the same policy as Akbar did. That is, these groups were not to be treated as the conquerors and the conquered, the rulers and the vanquished. Rather, every effort ought to be made for the meeting of their hearts. They should meet more frequently, and there should be marriage alliances between them. They should not be merely Hindus or Muslims, but Indians in the true sense of the term. There should be no difference between them. He was in fact even more advanced in his thinking than Akbar had been. He had endowed Hindu Rajas with honorable titles, had lifted the jizya tax which the Hindu subjects had to pay. He believed that the custom of getting married to the girls of Hindu royal families was inadequate. According to him, the Mughals should do more to establish and sustain healthy marital relations with them. He knew it very well that the Hindus considered it humiliating to have their daughters married outside the religion, while the Muslims didn't allow their own daughters to be married to the Hindus. True give and take could happen only when there was no difference between boys and girls. He felt strongly about it and was waiting for an opportunity to put this custom into practice. Prince Dara Shikoh was not only a great patriot, he was a man of great learning too. He knew all the established Indian languages, including the beautiful Sanskrit which he loved. He spent hours sitting near the fountain reading the philosophies of Patanjali or Gautama. Reflecting deeply upon these treatises, he often felt overwhelmed and wept. Apart from Asian languages, He had command over several European languages. He was conversant with Latin, Greek, and Aramaic. He was also not totally unfamiliar with the emerging languages like French, English, and German. He could understand ordinary conversations in them and could convey his own thoughts in short sentences. He was truly a multifaceted genius, endowed with the talents to rule a vast empire. Dara Shikoh did not commit the same mistake as Akbar did. Among Akbar's advisors were either Hindus or Muslims. One inevitable consequence of this was that the two groups were always in a tug-of-war. Only an emperor like Akbar, endowed with great poise and balance in his temperament, could control them. It was obvious that their advice was always colored by their ideology. Members of the two communities advised the emperor according to their ideological and communal leanings. This fear made Prince Dara Shikoh seek advice from Europeans, as they would be free of such communal prejudices. And so he first sought information from each one of his courtiers, and then sought suggestions from his European advisors before arriving at a final decision. One afternoon, Prince Dara Shikoh was seated in his Diwani Khas, on an ornate throne in the center. Surrounding him in the court, seated according to their position in the administrative hierarchy, were his advisors dressed in formal attire. The prince's face indicated deep reflection. He had a farman in his hand. He would look at it frequently with anxious eyes and ponder long and hard over it. On his right was a gem-studded chair on which sat Henry Busett. He was the prince's favorite advisor, whose opinion carried much weight. Next to Henry Busett was Malbecker, seated on another gem-studded chair. And on the left of the throne was seated Dr. Francois Bernier, a French traveler, lost in thought, while next to him an ambassador from Portugal, Padre Jesuit, sat very still. The whole court was steeped in an astounding silence. The prince finally said, "Gentlemen, perhaps you have heard the news about the failure of the expedition to Kandahar." This brief statement took the color off the faces of those present. Everyone was dumbstruck, and no one uttered a word for many minutes. Finally, Henry Busett said, "We are deeply grieved to hear this. We are great admirers of the empire." Then, Padre Jesuit said, "But I can't understand why the expedition failed. The trainers of the cannon-wielding army were mostly Europeans, who had the blessings of Lord Christ on them. Their failure cannot be explained." Saying this, he took out a small image of Christ from his locket and kissed it reverentially. Now it was the turn of Dr. Bernier. He cast a glance at his audience and said, "Dear sirs, to tell you the truth, I had my doubts about the success of this expedition from the very beginning. Prince Mohiuddin was not competent enough to lead the charge. Not because he is less experienced, but precisely because he has been unable to suppress his prejudices. I'm sure the reason for this failure was Raja Jagat Singh's parting of ways." There was silence for several minutes. Finally, the prince broke the silence by stating, "Dear sirs, I don't wish to argue about the true reason for the failure of the expedition. Such an investigation is not possible. You know very well that conducting such an investigation will go against reason and prudence." The prince uttered these words haltingly. It seemed as though he was anguished by the thoughts that exercised his mind. His heart was plagued by contradictory impulses. The prince finished his statement and looked at the courtiers meaningfully. What he couldn't say in words was conveyed by his eyes. Padre Jesuit replied thus, "Your Majesty, I beg your pardon. This slave holds the view that we should analyze the causes of failure from a certain vantage point. However undesirable it might be, knowing the reasons will help avoid such failures in future. Failures give us an opportunity to correct our mistakes. From this angle, I feel that successes are not as important as failures. Undoubtedly, there cannot be a better teacher of worldly affairs than failures. Saying this, the padre threw a proud glance at his audience. It was as though he had done something extraordinary. Of course, it required courage to disagree with the prince. Everyone liked his proposal. The prince agreed with them and said, "Padre Sahib, whatever you say is correct. There's no doubt that I was in the wrong, but you must have understood from my tone that I often have to commit such errors. I do not have any objection in investigating the causes of the failure of this expedition, but sometimes ignoring a fact becomes more prudent and desirable. This is particularly so when the reputation of a member of the royal family is involved. At this moment, we only want to decide whether it will be better to retreat from Kandahar. So far we have sent 2 expeditions to Kandahar, but both of them have met with failure. You are not unaware what a drain these expeditions are on the royal exchequers." His European advisors were lost in thought. The issue was extraordinarily grave, and its solution required careful reflection. They pondered over this matter for 15 to 20 minutes, after which the debate began. Henry Busett asked, "Since when has Kandahar been under the Mughal suzerainty?" E.R. Bernier replied, "From the times of Emperor Babur. And the Mughals couldn't consolidate their power there, even after such a long time. The reason is that after Emperor Babur, other emperors became so occupied with the affairs of statecraft in India that they couldn't pay adequate attention to Kandahar. That is why the bond between the 2 countries became slack." In short, you mean to say that Kandahar was not considered as profitable as any other Indian province to give it adequate attention. If they had done so, the situation in Kandahar would not have got out of hand. Indeed, the Mughal emperors spent most of their time in subjugating Hindu kings and settling disputes between different provinces. The previous emperor had certainly wanted to send an expedition to Kandahar, but had to give up the idea because of many hurdles. It can't be said with certainty why the Mughal emperors remained indifferent to Kandahar. The distance could be one reason, fear of failure could be another. A third reason could be the lack of adequate resources. 2. Panic in a tunnel. Rishi and his family were traveling by the newly constructed parallel underground metro along the Konkan railway line. A part of the Konkan railway route consists of the Kharbud Tunnel, which is the 2nd longest railway tunnel in India, along the Konkan coast near Ratnagiri. It extends up to 6.5 kilometers and falls between Akshi and Bok stations. We were eager to experience the journey through the tunnel. Unfortunately, the power failed midway, complete darkness set in, and the train came to an abrupt halt. There was panic, people were trying in vain to open the automatic doors. There was mayhem everywhere. Parents tried to pacify children by shining the flashlights of their handsets. We were yearning desperately for the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. All the passengers folded their hands in prayer. Suddenly, from nowhere, an old man knocked at the door of our compartment. It opened, and he got in. Miraculously, the lights came on, and the train began moving. Everyone began looking around for him to thank him for being their savior. He was not to be seen anywhere. We were in a state of wonder. Did we actually see the good Lord, our Savior? 3. Grammar page.